Good day, friends. Welcome to another Word of Gord's OBEJournal 2018, and it's number 13 in the series, any of which you can watch at any time, but there is a certain thread that is followed in and out of the maze of consciousness if you go from number 1 onwards. There are relations to be followed. This morning, I'd like to talk about and it is morning, it's very morning. It's so morning, it hasn't even arrived yet. It's still quite dark. Discussing the concept of home. I notice quite a few spirit communicators or channelers, explorers will speak about the spirit world as home, and when we go there as returning home. And well, this is an appealing notion to those of us who feel a little stressed out by life on earth, a little weary of the negativity on this plane, the suffering, the ego battles expressed on many levels. This is as much home as anywhere else, as far as I'm concerned anyway. All the levels are temporary homes. They're kitted out with situations, potentials for the challenges and explorations that you are ready for. And when you move to the next planes after your so-called death, you will find there are more challenges there, accompanied by many more pleasures and joys, I might add. But the challenges are there, if you choose to take them up. And most do, in their own good time. There's no rush, just as there's not that much of a rush here, unless you have picked an incarnation of poverty and need, in which case you will be hustling a lot. Or in that for that matter, an incarnation of ambition, in which case you will be chivied by your ambitions for many decades, satisfying one and then finding 5 more. But if one picks, one can't say a normal life, there is no such thing as a normal life, a life with sufficient challenges to keep you interested and sufficient pleasures and joys to keep you happy. This level can feel like home, and which indeed it is for the time that you are here. It will cradle you and nurture you in the same way that a mother and father will cradle and nurture a baby. It may not feel like it's cradling you, but it is. Each level has its, you could say, designated purpose or set of purposes. Some to stimulate the body, some to stimulate the heart, some to stimulate the mind, all of them to stimulate the spirit in one way or another. But when we are tired of this life, this incarnation on earth, when we're weary of all the negativity, as I said, the sort of thing that's in the papers every morning or on TV every night, weary of illness, suffering, the deaths of others, we can begin to long for the life beyond the veil, the life of seeming fulfillment of desire, the life of heavenly rewards, the life which ends the annoying, frustrating, suffering life, even if one doesn't see it as a life, as atheists and agnostics often do. They still see it as a great rest, even if they don't believe there's anything there. At least there's the absence of craziness. There are, as we know from the many explorations that we've participated in on these explorations, in this series, many challenges, many points of interest and mystery to be explored in the spirit worlds. I've only touched on a few, really, despite all my chattering on the last few years. The mystery of existence itself, the why are we here at all story, that can be explored on the astral planes. That can be pondered upon as one surfs through the pleasures and joys of paradise. Answers can be achieved, but they're not final answers. There are no final answers. Many of us explore these things in the astral plane and wind up being satisfied with temporary answers or no answers at all. Because, in fact, the mystery of existence is really no more resolved by experience in the astral and mental body. Our experience is widened in those bodies, widened, deepened, made more exciting, but ultimately they're not answers. Just as on this plane, if you have leisure and money, you can explore the planet in a pleasant and leisurely fashion. You can go to many countries, explore many landscapes, both hot, cold, dry, wet. Experience in detail many cultures, completely different from your own, and many cities, many towns, many religions. You can make yourself completely knowledgeable, if you so choose, about the many manifestations of Mother Nature, the many delightful and endlessly creative mutations of species, animals, fish, birds, etc., etc. You can explore all of this while, staying in lovely hotels and, moving around. And at the end of that, you will be filled with wonder, knowledge, and a sense of achievement, I suppose. But it's not a final achievement. You will still have questions. Exploring the amazing variety of manifestation and mutation by animals and nature alone will fill you with great wonders. But it won't answer the question of why, or the question of where to next. Likewise, in the spirit world, in the astral planes that millions and millions of us live in after we part from here, will fill you with the wonder of existence even more than here. Partly because you've more leisure to explore it, other than being a rather wealthy person with a lot of leisure. But it won't answer any of your ultimate questions if you choose to have those ultimate questions. You will be filled with more knowledge and experience and wonder and the complexity of relationships, and probably transcend your own feelings of, the more negative stuff, those feelings of pointlessness and worthlessness and, feeling surrounded by conflict and stupidity that we feel here. You will transcend that. And that's a very worthy and wonderful thing to do. And it will feel more like a comfortable home from which you can learn and, how should we say, joyfully experience. But you can get a surfeit of that too. And in the old spiritualist books, they will talk about moving up through the planes. They don't talk about it quite as much now, but it still is a factor. And you can define the various lit planes or focus levels in a number of ways. They do become more refined, more challenging in many ways, as you move on up, as they say. And as we've discussed here before, until eventually you become more and more transparent, lighter and lighter, less and less humanoid, if you're humanoid to begin with, and more and more giddy with the prospect of freedom from personality and character and absorption of the elements of enlightenment. There is a certain giddiness to be achieved, and a greater and greater perception of how you can help others who are not as far along the path. And you can certainly become some kind of a teacher at various levels. You can do that right when you pass. But as you move on up, the possibilities become greater for that type of expression. And again, this is a sort of an aspect of being comfortable in a spiritual home. And I'm not disputing that comfort level. All I'm saying is it's temporary. All stages are temporary. There's nothing permanent about any of this. On each stage of the reincarnation cycle, as you're moving on up to the higher self level, the monadic level, and bonding with the monad and sort of re-entering its greater energy, and part of you staying there, like sort of like, as I've said, the digital file in the ultimate digital hotel, part of you returns. A rejigged part, rejigged by higher self, I might add. And while you're experiencing all of that, there's this whole mysterious sort of exploration again of who are you and who is higher self and how do you relate, and which one is more real and which one is the source, chicken and egg stuff. And an exploration of that, which is often, in my experience watching others, ended by an acceptance of never really knowing who is the source and who is the projection. Although the conventional sort of accepted answer is higher self is the source and you are the projection, the divine spark that's coming back down through the planes onto earth for a new beginning in a new womb, in a new family, in a new culture, or perhaps the same old culture. We repeat often. We get comfort zones and we repeat our cultural experience. There is an exploration of answers, metaphysically or whatever you consciousness-wise, but in terms of rational understanding, there are no answers other than further experiences, as far as I'm concerned anyway. Higher self, although a greater, deeper being than the human personality on earth, is not a deity, nor does it want to be. And if you're looking for deities for answers and rest cures and all the rest of it, and an absence of experiential struggles, you're not going to find it there. Because there is no end to experiencing and transformation. There is no end at all. And any of these levels that I've sort of talked about and hinted at can feel like home while you're there, or can feel like home as you're longing for the next level. And a lot of the New Age movement is an exploration of longing for understanding, longing for peace, longing for absence of struggle. And, another ambition, another desire. I'm not sort of putting it down and critiquing it. I'm just, shall we say, categorizing it. In the formless energy planes, which again are closer to complete transcendence, but I wouldn't say fully there. And when one is in the formless energy planes, there is no space between one planet and the next, or one universe and an adjacent universe. They all extend to that level. And believe me, there is no planets and asteroids and stuff spinning around suns when you get to that level. Not at all. That's coming. One of the things you see when you come down a level or two, or more than a level or two. And so for those of you who feel the excitement of galactic exploration and the knowledge of the universes, that is an exciting adventure in itself. explored in sci-fi like Star Trek, etc. But there is no ultimate answer. You go to one planetary body and another, other cultures with other beings that we like to call aliens or extraterrestrial biological entities. And they have their encultured answers to metaphysical and physical questions. But they're still exploring, they're still pondering, they're all in a form, for one thing. They are created beings. And this is, I believe, an important notion to grasp and understand, that we're all created beings. Humans, animals, nature spirits, devas, beings from other planets, whatever their form, and whatever their abilities, whether they exceed our abilities or not, they're all created beings. And on the other side of that, prophets, angels, archangels, they're created beings too. And beyond that, there's the spirit of creativity, this endlessly mysterious energy that manifests forms from the unmanifest, that which is not manifest. And you can explore that too. And all you will get is energies and forms coming out of the unmanifest. Endlessly. Sort of like lava coming out of volcanoes. It never stops. Slows down, speeds up, gets hotter, gets colder, never stops. That is an essential part of the mystery, the unmanifest and the manifest. The manifest being all the forms of nature, forms of humanity, etc., etc. And it's the same on other planets. So as you do the Star Trek thing, either watching the show or actually doing it, as Earthlings will be doing, and well, we're already doing it, but we'll be doing it in a greater degree in the next 100 years, that's for sure. As you stay on some kind of Mars orbiter or some moon base, whatever. There's the excitement of that, and there is great knowledge to be gained, but there is an end to that knowledge. Cultural variations will get tiring after a while. We have many cultures on Earth, and you can explore them all and in a curious and open-minded fashion, and gain pleasure and understanding from that exploration. But ultimately, other cultures won't give you any more answers on a metaphysical level than the one you're in. I see lots of people in my generation anyway, coming from Christian backgrounds and exploring Buddhist and Hindu cultures and their answers to metaphysical questions and their spiritual disciplines. And in my experience, they don't understand very much more about the nature of life and death, quote unquote, and eternity, and the transmutations experienced in eternity than they did when they were Christians, even if they were lapsed, non-practicing Christians. But they have an attachment to all the efforts that they've made, the 30 years of learning to do whatever practice or rituals were prescribed in the sects that they entered. And not to mention their extreme disappointment in the faults, the very human faults of teachers and gurus, which will send people into a tailspin of despair, as we all know. And finding out that monks can be as sexually perverted as priests. Not to mention sleazy in their real estate deals. All terribly human. But so those explorations of human culture here on Earth will be just replicated in greater detail and variation as we explore the physical universe and encounter beings from other places and times. And but they will still be filled with concepts of gods and deities and purposes that may seem more profound than the ones you're coming from, but ultimately they don't have any, how shall I put it, answers which end the questing. They will have concepts of ambition and exploration and control. I often look at the entities, the alien entities that have been here for a while, interacting with us and using sperm and eggs to create hybrid beings. And acting very, sort of superior and knowledgeable and, well, control freaks for sure. It seems to me they're acting out of desperation, and they always have been. Their species is dying out, and they're using us and our DNA to bolster their weakening species. This was quite obvious to me from the early tales of abductees being forced to cradle weedy and sickly-looking babies because the hybrid experiment was not, in the first few generations, successful. We're hearing now from people, various researchers, 2 or 3 anyway, that the hybridization project is much more successful in its current generational issue, and hybrids are living on Earth and learning to be humans. David Jacobs, for example, thinks they're out to control us because they will have more psychic powers. And once they get comfortable as humans on Earth, they will be like little sergeant majors telling us what to do. I suspect that will not be the case, but that's just my idea. But they're not godlike beings. They are beings. They are created beings, rather frantically trying to preserve themselves. And their frantic activities seem to me to be on a par with our encultured frantic activities as we try to dominate each other and maintain our control. The dominant races and species trying to maintain control over others. Whether it's, the genocidal activities that we see going on in various countries as they suppress or eliminate or try to eliminate other religious groups, other ethnic groups. It's all to maintain control, to be the boss. Ultimately, that's what it's all about. And I see the same thing in the Greys, as we call them the Greys. The Greys. They call themselves other things, I'm sure. But in the realm of created beings, there is really only exploration, acquisition, dominance, and control. Until you give that up, of course, and become freed from your the dictates of your culture, as I hope, as I feel that many of us are. We're on that journey where we give that up. We don't need to be in control. We don't need to be the dominant species. We're quite happy to be an exploring individual freed from belief systems. But if you explore the accounts, even, or if you have the good fortune to be in contact with various alien species, even if you don't remember very much of what happens, as it happens out of body, you can still see that they are exploring beings. They are trying to find sometimes minerals on our planet, and sometimes other things are almost indefinable to sustain their existence because they're running out of them where they are, or to sustain their notions of superiority. The ones that claim they're here to and they enslaved us a long time ago, and they mutate us as they see fit, all that sort of stuff. They're only clinging to their own ambitions and claiming that they are more useful and purposeful than what we are doing. And I would say, look at children playing. Is what they're doing more purposeful and useful than what we're doing? No, it's appropriate for their level of growth. They're exploring, whether it's toys, pets, they're exploring their relationship to those things to expand their understanding. And when they transcend that level of learning, they move on to the next, as we do. And when we look back from spirit world, when we're past, we see ourselves here at an earlier stage of learning. And to me, it seems all the alien entities are doing much the same thing. There are other levels of learning, and they're exploring them, trying to better themselves, to use a cliched, hackneyed phrase. We explore and we expand, and we rest at various stages, and each of those rest stages can seem like home. But they are temporary residences. Residences from which we will expand and renew our adventures on other, perhaps deeper, more mysterious levels. For many of us, for example, on the astral plane, learning to create with your mind can be a marvelously interesting and challenging and fun experience. Creating everything with your mind, with your thought patterns. And many of you know this. This goes on, and we will all participate when we get there, and we do when we're out of body too, sleeping and projecting. Creation by thought is a marvelously exhilarating learning curve. And that can take up great amounts of time and quote-unquote time and quote-unquote energy when one is in the post-mortem state. And endlessly entertaining. I mean, really it is. And as you do simple tasks and more creative, subtly creative tasks, detailed, you can come to understand the teaching that will be given to you at some point, that the very landscapes in which you are living on the astral plane were created earlier by other creative beings exercising their mental creativity. Landscapes in which you are walking around and feeling blessed by the beauties of nature were created out of what some people call mind stuff. Now, they seem incredibly real, and they are incredibly real. There's nothing unreal about them, but they are mental creations. And they were done and put in place by beings greater than yourselves who trod the path sometime before. Many of them. And from that, you can expand to a greater understanding of the physical universes. They were created too. This planet that we're living on was created out of energies. And the higher self that I, Gordon, emanate from, participated in that creation. I've been given memories of that, although they're awfully hard to explain. And I've had, people who study with me email me and say, "Oh, I had a dream where you showed me how the planet was created." And they're filled with wonder when they say this, but they can't really explain it, other than, a lot of whooshing energies and things flying about. And it was obviously an incredible, sort of breathtaking dream experience, but they find it very hard to find the words. But, and I do too, and I am right at this minute. I couldn't give you any detailed, it winds up being like a Disney movie with a magician sort of waving his hands around and things coming together. And that's about as close as I can get. And I know that's totally inadequate, and I don't pretend it to be adequate in any way. But to outline the progressions of understanding, for many of us, it's the experiencing thought creation of small things and more detailed things. A leaf. You can create that by thought on the astral plane once you're given a few tips and shown how to focus. You can do it. And you expand from that. And if you're still interested after a while, you can go to classes, and it will be explained to you in greater detail than I'm doing right now, that stars and planets were created out of the sort of universal energy stuff that how shall we say, exists at the subatomic level. And, electrons, protons, and neutrons and all that sort of stuff bonded together in interesting, diverse ways by thought. So then you say, well, okay, what's thought created of? Does it have a molecular structure? Does it have a subatomic structure? Is it essentially different from the energy that it is using to create form? These are the sort of things that you get to after a while. The metaphysical subtleties. And you may think, well, it's going to be a long while before I get to that, Gordon. And it may be. But to show you the various levels of learning and exploring and understanding, and how nitpicky it can all get. There's the fun of doing mental creation, and believe me, it's fun. And there's the deeper, more nitpicky, metaphysical questing of trying to understand it all in a more deeply profound way. You can fly a kite on a windy day, but can you understand the forces that enable that kite to exist, the wind to exist, and the interaction of kite and wind? There's the two levels there. So here we are at home on Earth. And after we die, we'll be at home on the astral plane. And as we explore and get a little dissatisfied with the initial pleasures and joys of the astral plane, we will move on up through the various levels, exploring each one of those levels to our amusement and satisfaction, until we get back to the higher self, till we transcend form completely and become what I've described as, pure intelligence, a cloud of pure intelligence that knows everything but has exhausted its urge to utilize that knowledge. Knowing everything, but having no desire to utilize that knowledge. That is a transcendence. That is an enlightenment. And when we come back to the fields of activity on the various planets, that is what we're doing. We're moving away from complete understanding, omniscience, and omnipresence into a denser, more focused level where we give up some of the knowledge, some of the transcendental understanding, in order to manipulate it and create. And this is why I see, and others do, but not everyone, the concept of God and godlike activity as being non-interfering with us and not manipulative in any way. And of course, this gets back to all the metaphysical disputes of many religions. Does God interact with us, or does he stand apart? And of course, he's not a he at all, but it's interesting. And I don't feel that the God concept, the God experience, interferes with our lives in any way. We're rather like a bunch of wind-up dolls that are left alone in a dollhouse to do as we wish. For the God consciousness, as I call it, mere existence is enough. Manipulating existence for pleasure or ambition is just not on the cards. It's enough to be and unfold. And as we know, the universe continues to unfold, expanding in all directions at greater and greater speeds. Going where, we would say? Going where? Well, I'll leave you with that as we charge on, going where?